look at how to convert your model into a printable file. First, I'm going to open up my model. If you have your project, please set your project and open it. In this case, I'm going to open up a former student project, and of course it's doing it in a new window. And we have two pieces here. We have the character and a stand. If we want both, we'll need to export both separately. I'm just going to grab the figure in this case. I do want you to note that this figure is very small. So by default, these are centimeters. And so this character is only 4 centimeters in size. If you want to change that, you can of course grab it and scale up the whole model. You can also go into your preferences. Let's see, Windows settings, preferences, and you have, and of course they've hidden it. Let's see, display. Okay. So here are our working units. You can always crank that up into inches or meters if you wanted to. So just something to think about. So I've grabbed this object's mesh. It's safer to do it here. I don't want to actually grab a light or anything. But I want to grab this and I want to file, export the selection, hit the option box, and choose object export all the way down here at the bottom. I'm going to export that selection. It's going to go into wherever my project was set to. So let me put it in where I can find it. And so now I have this object file. So this is the object geometry. This is the material file or the colors for it. We're not going to end up using this because we don't print the colors with this. We only print the geometry. I'm going to go ahead and open up MakerBot Print. And you'll have to log in to MakerBot Print. I've previously logged in. It's Thingiverse or MakerBot, depending on which one you are used to using. So if you have an existing project, you can open that. Otherwise, we'll just import. You can also look at Thingiverse and download something. But I'm going to bring in a model, the one we just made. And I can bring in additional models if I want to print multiples. I can also copy something and print multiples of it. You can see it is concerned. This is very, very tiny, so we're going to have to scale up. So we have arrange, orient, or rotate, and scale, and this obviously needs to be scaled significantly. So I'm going to select the model, and if we scale to max, it's going to, let's see, get pretty big. Let's try 1,000. That seems like a more reasonable size to be printing at. And the movement here is a little different than in Maya. I'm repositioning with the middle mouse button and I'm rotating with the right mouse button. I do not want to print probably like this. What it's going to do is I'd have to build all of these supports underneath here. So you want to look at your figure and decide what is going to be the best, let me make this bigger, orientation. So I think just having this little guy stand up is going to be our best bet. And I can always come back in and change this. So if I want this to be even larger, say 1,500, I can scale it up there too. Tiny details like these toes might get lost in a smaller print. In fact, they will get lost in a smaller print. If you have multiples, you can arrange them on your board. Say you're printing a series of something. And we're looking at the model view right now and our info, so we're in millimeters. unconnected printer here. So we're using the, let's see, Replicator Plus, and this is going to allow us, and it's saying export only because it's not plugged in, and let me put this back down. That's going to let us access our print settings. So Smart Extruder is correct. Balanced is your standard mode. It goes faster with draft and min-fill, but you're going to get worse results. You have lots of settings here. For instance, I have a raft, which will be on the bottom of the character to help it stick to the plate and then come off of the plate eventually. This is the speed of the printer. And part of the reason that you change these things is to get different prints, but also better prints. So here's our temperature choices, our extruder retraction difference. If your things are too far apart, your lines are too far apart, you can bring it closer in order to fill those gaps. Too far away and it's not going to connect and it'll start to string. You have shells that go around it. The infill is the structure on the inside. You don't, usually it's done by density, and you don't want too dense, too low and it's brittle, too dense and you're just wasting your material. You've got different patterns of infill as well. And then floors for it to sit on. Supports for bridging. So you might, so right now our support angle is set to 68, which is the standard. Anything over 68 degrees is going to get a support. If you want to support under bridges, you can. This should be okay, but if you find that things are not going across correctly, it's going from one, say, leg to the other, and it's falling through, you may then need to support under your bridges as well. And then you've got your options with that as in addition. So lots of stuff in here. So balanced is usually going to be, and I'm actually going to just reset to default, and it should be okay at the default. You really don't need to come in here unless you're starting to have fails, and then you can start adjusting what you need, but most of what we need is going to be just fine under balanced. Okay, and I do actually want breakaway supports. So this is not going to be able to print, it can't print in midair. So I need supports to be built so that it can start to print on top of them to then print that arm. Same thing for the chin. Sometimes if you have enough of a build-up angle and it's subtle enough, it can handle it. That hair, it's not, again, not going to be able to print in midair. It's going to need a support for that. So anything overhanging needs a support, and then you'll break away those supports once it's finished, and you'll need to sand where they were connected. But they're not as firmly connected to the piece as the piece is to itself. So we'll hit export and put it on our drive. And we do not want a .mtl, we want a MakerBot file. And so now we have a demo file that is getting prepared for us that should show up in here. It has to think about each slice, each level, each layer that it's doing, or it's going to have to do, in each XY position it's going to have to hit. So it's doing a lot of thinking. It's showing us that it's going to take 1 hour and 8 minutes, and it'll need 1/3 of a PLA spool, and it'll even tell us the time if we get started now. So here's our demo.makerbot. So that's what the MakerBot is going to read, is that demo file there, that .makerbot extension. The larger the piece, the longer it's going to take. Obviously, the more detailed it is, the longer it's going to take. So just know that it may be a little bit depending on what you're doing. You can hit this if you want to see the estimates and the print. So this gives me a preview of the thing I just exported. So all the green is my original model and the yellow is my supports. So you see that right here, it's an angle that it feels like it can tackle, whereas the head, it doesn't think it can. And you can see that it's going to build supports for these pieces of hair, but it doesn't feel like it needs to build supports for the ears. And again, that's based on the angle in our settings here under the supports. And if we were to support under bridges, we can see if that changes the supports as well. Supports are really helpful in getting your prints out, but of course you have to take them off when you clean your model. So, yeah. And you may end up losing, these tiny bits are hard to reproduce with this sort of system. So it did add a little bit of support here under the arm, a little bit under the hair there. So, all right, well, now that you've got your file, you can take it over to the machine, plug in the USB, and get going.